Hello, and welcome to another Sports Next Door podcast. My name is Owen. Today is Monday, March 29th, and I am joined, as I always am, by my neighbor Max. How's it going, my friend?
Good. Got a bit of restless energy today. Yesterday was like a cooped up in the house during the rain day, and I don't know, I did absolutely nothing. So looking to be a little more productive today and kick it off with this. How are you doing?
Pretty good, thanks. Pretty good. Yeah, you get those first couple like days of seemingly warm weather, and when it's in that kind of cold mix where it's not snowing anymore, and you get those couple kind of nice days, you forget that most of spring is just rain all the time. And obviously there'll be a couple nice days, hopefully next weekend as we approach the Easter weekend. But yeah, I really same for me. Stuck inside most of the days, finishing up a lot of final projects, getting ready to roll. Only got 2 weeks left in the semester of classes.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that feeling of just like graduation getting ridiculously imminently close and nothing feeling different. And to be honest, I still half feel like a student.
Yeah. The other thing that's getting imminently close is the opening day of baseball season.
Killing them with segues.
Yeah. And that's where we're going to start the podcast today, followed by some combat corner, some basketball, a little bit of tennis talk, the Miami Open in full swing. Then we got a little bit of hockey and some football to wrap things up. A pretty packed show today. And I'm going to kick it off with my MLB season preview, which is probably going to be the most half-baked out of the 3 previews that we have done so far in the history of this podcast. Max is by all means not a baseball fan. And I am out of touch with some of the younger and upcoming players in the league. So you may see me tend to drift towards the names that I know and possibly the teams that I know when I'm doing this preview. I do have some of the projections up here on my other screen. And of course, whatever else I could find to give me a sort of sense. There are some teams that are obviously going to be near the top, but I think I have a couple of choices that waver from the common expectations. So without further ado, I shall jump directly into the most exciting division, in my opinion, in the MLB, the American League East, which consistently brings the offense and less so in the pitching department. I have the New York Yankees winning this division this season. Their lineup is just mashers all the way through. Primarily, you've got Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, and many others to follow them. I think the biggest thing with this Yankees team, as honestly with most teams in all sports, is health. Their top guys have consistently had to battle injuries throughout the season and miss half the amount of games that you normally play. And that's a big toll for them to take. Luckily, they're the Yankees and usually have talent in a lot of different positions. And especially adding Corey Kluber in the offseason to really have that dynamic 1-2 with Garrett Cole. Their pitching staff is a little bit more top heavy than it's usually been, and that's good enough to get them. They'll probably get 40 wins out of those guys alone. And so with the lineup that they have and those top 2 starting guys, the Yankees just look to be the juggernaut atop the AL East and should take it. But that's not to count out the Tampa Bay Rays, Toronto Blue Jays, Boston Red Sox. We can count out Baltimore. We know they won't be good, but those top 4 teams are all going to be pretty solid and bring a ton of offense. So it'll be fun, long, fun games to watch in the AL East this year. We go to the American League West, where I believe this division's a little bit weaker. A couple of teams have lost guys. Obviously, we have the Los Angeles Angels with Trout and Ohtani, which will be exciting to watch, but I just still think the Angels don't have the club that's built around those guys, and it might never be enough for Mike Trout. So I do not have them picked. I'm going to go with the Houston Astros to win the American League West, and that is narrowly over the Oakland Athletics, mostly because of the core that Houston was able to keep together. They lose George Springer, of course, in the offseason, and Justin Verlander not playing at the beginning of the season either, but still with a core of Alex Bregman, Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, Zach Greinke, Lance McCullers, who they just re-signed. Really solid core for Houston. They've been through it. They've proven it. They've already gone a full season now without having to face the true hatred of fans for the sign stealing scandal. And I feel like that might fall a little bit to the wayside again this season. So we'll have to see. But the Oakland Athletics are solid. I just think their team, because of the small payroll that they have, they just aren't ever able to accumulate enough talent. So this is definitely the weakest division in the American League, and I see it going to the Astros. The American League Central, this will be a fun one. Everyone is focused on the National League West for the battle of juggernauts there, but I think the American League Central has two juggernauts that will be going at it too, and that is the Chicago White Sox and the Minnesota Twins. I have the White Sox picked to win the division. Lucas Giolito emerging as a front runner for the Cy Young. And you've, of course, got Dallas Keuchel and Lance Lynn, two veteran pitchers behind him to provide some stability to the rotation. And their core is really young and really exciting. Tim Anderson, Yohan Moncada, and Jose Abreu has consistently been one of the best run producers in baseball now for the last 5 to 6 years. And this White Sox team is just still on an upward trend. They're getting better every year. The pitching's been more and more solid. The hitting has been fantastic. And I have them picked to go a lot farther than just winning the AL Central. So stay tuned for that. We'll wrap up the American League with the wild card matchup. I have the Tampa Bay Rays visiting the Minnesota Twins. Oh, I almost said Timberwolves. Freudian slip there. I'm picking against the Toronto Blue Jays once again. I am very well known for emotionally hedging all of my picks, as I did with the Islanders, as I did with the Blue Jays in the playoffs last season, as I've done with the Toronto Raptors. So I picked them not to make the playoffs here, but if they do, then it is just gravy for me. The injuries for the Blue Jays, probably too much to overcome. Even to start the season, like their lineup is going to mash, but the pitching is not there, and they're going to need some guys to step up out of that bullpen. So I have the Rays, who obviously made it to the World Series last year, and the Minnesota Twins, who again are continually building out a roster. Them and Chicago are in an arms race in the AL Central, and so those will be my two wildcard teams heading into the playoffs. We have the National League. I'm going to start in the NL East. The Atlanta Braves. I have them picked because they have the deepest team in the division, talent at every position, and something to prove after really falling out early in the last couple of postseason runs that they've made. Their core is looking to be in the prime of its window, and you've got Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna Jr., Marcell Ozuna, Travis d'Arnaud, all really solid guys who are going to make this lineup tough to work through. And the pitching is solid too. They get Mike Soroka back, who missed the entire 2020 with an Achilles injury. They pick up Charlie Morton and Drew Smyly as bargain bin, really solid additions to add to the end of that rotation. So yeah, Atlanta looks to be really solid, and I have them picked to win the NL East. The division that most MLB fans are excited for is the NL West. This is probably the division to watch besides the AL East, and that is because you have the two best teams in baseball in the same division. The Los Angeles Dodgers and the San Diego Padres this is like the space race, but in baseball. Like, these two teams have accumulated such a wealth of talent and depth at each position. The starters are incredible, like especially Los Angeles, who get the Cy Young winner Trevor Bauer in free agency to add to a rotation that includes Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, David Price, Julio Urias, and Dustin May, who probably won't even make the starting rotation. Just unbelievable pitching from this club. And San Diego on the other side makes the pickup of Yu Darvish to be their number one guy, and have made some big trades to go all in. And I know they got Mike Clevenger last season. We'll see if he's healthy and back in time to pitch this season. I have the Dodgers winning just because of the continuity. San Diego's still a team that's putting it all together. They will be there come playoff time. But Los Angeles has just been doing it now for decades. And Mookie Betts is the leader of that team. Of course, you still got Cody Bellinger as well. They're going to have a bunch of MVP front runners, and it's a really solid team up and down. They're the model franchise in the MLB, and it's hard to pick against them to have success. The National League Central Division. This one was a tough one to pick as well. You've got quite a few teams in there, Chicago, St. Louis, but I'm going with the Milwaukee Brewers to scoop up the NL Central this year. Barely edging out St. Louis because I love the Nolan Arenado pickup, but I'm going with Milwaukee. I think Christian Yelich is going to bounce back. He was MVP in 2019, had a really tough year in 2020. Can't really hold anything in 2020 against anyone. So I expect him to bounce back and have an excellent MVP caliber year. Colton Wong and Jackie Bradley Jr. were good pickups for the Brewers, and their team is solid. The pitching is really going to rely on their two young stud starters, Woodruff and Burns. Those two are projected to have fantastic seasons, but when pitching is so young, you usually don't see that same level of production. But I went with it to go outside the box. St. Louis was too easy of a pick, so I'm going with the Milwaukee Brewers. And that leaves me with the National League wildcard race. I have the New York Mets visiting the San Diego Padres. The Padres are going to have the second best record in the league, but they will finish second in their division. That is my projection. And the New York Mets are going to have enough with Jacob deGrom and Pete Alonso and Marcus Stroman. And this team, I think, is going to do it. It's going to be between them and St. Louis, I think, for that last wildcard spot. And man, imagine if you're San Diego going to have such an incredible season and your reward is playing a 1-game elimination against Jacob deGrom in the wildcard game. Like, that's just craziness to me. But that is my MLB season preview for the division winners and the wild cards. I will jump quickly into the awards. The MVPs, the favorites for the MVP in both divisions or both conferences, are Mike Trout and Mookie Betts in the AL and NL respectively. Those are the easy ones that you can put in, not great value picks. The value picks that I chose to go with were DJ LeMahieu of the New York Yankees and Christian Yelich, of course. I got to back up my division winner preview, so I got to pick him to be an MVP dark horse. In the Cy Youngs, obviously the top two are Jacob deGrom and Garrett Cole. Again, not value picks. My value picks, I'm going with Kenta Maeda of the Minnesota Twins and Jack Flaherty of the St. Louis Cardinals. So two names that are not in the minds of most MLB fans. And so going off the book a little bit, and we've seen in previous years, no names really have a shot at Cy Youngs, or at least up and comers, because of how statistically based all these awards are now. So with all of that being said, I give you my World Series prediction. Feels pretty obvious who we have coming out of the National League. I cannot go against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Looking for them to defend their title. They will be there. But coming out of the American League, this was really tough. And I ended up going with the Chicago White Sox because I think their core is just really exciting. They have the pitching depth now. The Yankees always seem to just get so close and not make it over the hump to the World Series in this decade. I think that'll be the American League Championship Series, will be the White Sox and the Yankees. And I'm looking for Chicago to pull it out and make it there. And so it should be a really fun MLB season. There's going to be a lot of fans in the stands this summer because of the outdoor venues. So it's going to be our first real season of sports where it's going to feel like everything is back to normal, quote unquote, which I don't know if it ever will be, but the vaccination rates are rising here in Canada. And I know they're going out like crazy in the States. So we're going to see a lot of fans and should be a really fun MLB season. That wraps it up for my MLB season preview. We'll take a quick break and come back for some Combat Corner. And we're back. Max, UFC 260 over the weekend. There's some very interesting results, to say the least, but I will let you dive into that right now. Let's hear your recap of the weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to get right into it and just recap the 4 fights that I previewed earlier on Friday. So that's Robertson Maverick, Almeida O'Malley, Luque Woodley, and of course Miocic Ngannou. So starting off with Maverick Robertson, this fight kind of went more or less as expected. Miranda Maverick showed up looking like the bigger, stronger, more explosive woman in there and just maximized that athletic advantage everywhere the fight took place. Pretty evidently just a level above in the striking technique and ferocity, and Robertson was just trying to hang there on the feet and not get hurt and look for her opportunities, and she kind of got so overwhelmed keeping safe in the striking in the first round she didn't really even look for a takedown. Then I did really like the second round for her. She went with a pretty unconventional thing where she took the back on the body lock and then just dropped to the ground and pulled Maverick on top of her, but able to maintain back control. She got close a couple times. I can't believe two of the judges gave Maverick that round when Robertson had like almost 4 minutes of grapple control time where she was hunting submissions the whole time. Maybe better for optics to mix a little like ground and pound in there or something because they want to see damage. I don't know. I think it's hard to judge submission attempts even based on the MMA criteria, because you could make an argument that based on the criteria of like contributing towards finishing the fight and like damaging the health or longevity of your opponent, that a submission attempt should actually be rated for your opponent, because it often will take more longevity out of you and can break your spirit to squeeze and not get it. So maybe the submission attempts not very highly regarded by two of the judges in that second round. She didn't have her hooks in for most of them, but I thought they were fairly threatening, and I really liked that when Maverick got up, she went right back to that body lock, fall from the back, takedown again. So I kind of had some hopes for the third round, but Maverick just came out too ferocious and didn't really let Robertson get her back again to set up that position. And yeah, pretty solid third round for Maverick, and more or less how I saw the fight going, where Maverick had such an obvious edge in striking, and maybe if you put them in a 50-50 position, Robertson wins. She was great following the hips, and once she had top control, staying on top, like flowing from being on top of a sprawl to the kind of 3/4 backside mount onto the backside mount to take the back, and just always staying, never getting swept or scrambled out, but not quite levels above enough to find the finish. And then when Maverick got on top, Robertson wasn't able to reverse. Part of that probably the strength difference between the two. I did call Maverick as throwing a lot of leading body kicks in her last fight, which I thought would be to Robertson's favor, but she 100% cleaned that up. I didn't see one. So speaks to the fight IQ of Maverick, where you saw her doing something in her last fight that didn't work against her and I think helped her establish her range. And then in this fight, she took that out when it would have been a risk to her game and a path to defeat. So you've got to credit the fight IQ of Maverick. Looks like a great athlete. Pretty sick story that she was TAing her class while cutting weight Thursday before going to fight Saturday. I'm sure she'll be right back on her master's research and TAing. I think it was master's, not PhD. My mistake if I'm wrong about that. And yeah, she's looking like a good prospect for this division. Robertson may be going to be a little more underrated than she should be. She hasn't been finishing fights at quite the same rate that she was early in her career, but I think Talia Santos and Miranda Maverick, her last two defeats, are honestly could be top 5 in this women's flyweight division with the level of depth it has. So I'll be interested to see how those two, especially Maverick with her youth, proceed. Speaking of youth, the Sugar Show is back. Sean O'Malley, a little tongue in cheek, but I said he's got 3 finishes in one night to return the Sugar Show. and it was a vintage performance by him against a really durable, tough, hard to put away opponent. He thought he had it there in the first round with, I think, like a head kick to a straight that dropped him, tried to do the walk off, and it's 50-50. Honestly, I'm sure some refs would have seen that and called it. Like, if you think Yarzenia Rosenstrike, Alistair Overeem, very similar sequence, subtracting the giant lip bursting injury, but where the opponent goes down concussed against the side of the mat and the striker has an opportunity to finish. Because they have like such a clean avenue to punch and hurt them more, they feel like it's over, they stop. And in one case, the referee stopped it. In this case, the referee did not stop it. Got a lot of grief from the commentators, did Sean O'Malley, for that. But he totally, I think, for the most part, this worked out in his favor, other than wear and tear. He got to continue showcasing like a really solid performance where he just looked dominant in the striking all night, and he still got his finish in the end. Tried to do the walk off again. Bit of a strange finishing sequence where Almeida kind of charged in. O'Malley just landed like a quiet, sneaky hook in there, and he knew he landed because he tried to walk off again and just shoved Almeida off. Almeida falls, rolls, ends up on his back, and his guard is up. His hands are halfway there, so the referee doesn't call it, and O'Malley, with enough wherewithal to at least be watching his opponent as he tries to walk off, realizes the job is not done, and just like cool as a cucumber strolls over at this casual pace. He looks like he's out for a walk in the park, not like he's about to just jump in there with one massive looping shot into the guard, which slept the already sleeping fighter. So kind of funny that came right as DC was criticizing O'Malley for not finishing the fight, and now he's not going to have a finish. I think part of the criticism was just that instead of having a 1-round night at the office, he had a 3-round night at the office. But you think about the criticism of O'Malley about durability and wear and tear, and can this guy fight without getting injured? So having 3 rounds of time in the octagon where the opponent was trying to kick his leg and he was throwing his own leg kicks and he didn't get injured, I think is healthy for the stock of Sean O'Malley. He's not out of the woods yet. Like I said, that this is going to be a story for his next, I think I said 4 to 5 fights, so I'll say 3 to 4 fights now. He needs to get in there and show that he can get out without suffering some sort of freak ankle, leg, nerve, whatever injury before we start putting that behind us in our memory. But tonight, a great showing, and like I said, he looked dominant in the stand-up all night. Just maintaining his range really well. He mixed up the kicks beautifully. He was throwing like a teep to the knee with his lead leg. He'd throw a front kick in there, the spinning kicks, head kicks. He had some nice calf kicks as well. And then his bread and butter was just that 1-2, which he'd throw from straight and orthodox and explode out of his like safe range right into perfect range for that. I think a lot of guys with worse chins would have gone down a lot sooner because he was landing them at will all night. So great return for the Sugar Show, and I think he can more or less get right back on track to where he was before that Chito Vera fight. Looking forward to it, especially this new chip on his shoulder version, which I think makes him a little more entertaining for me. So the co-main event, Tyron Woodley, Vicente Luque, this fight certainly caught me by surprise. I think it was no secret to all the pundits that Tyron Woodley is in decline, and a huge part of that is just his fight strategy and style has become broadcasted to the entire world, including his opponent's fight camps, and they all knew what to do, and he did his best to flip the script in this one far more than I expected, coming out blitzing with those strikes, overhands, hooks, just throwing the kitchen sink from the second the referee said go. I thought the age showed because he tried to transition that blitz into a clinch takedown, and he had all this momentum going in where you saw Luque was just totally caught off guard. I thought he was going to get it for a second, but I think the difference in athleticism came up kind of key here, where Luque able to stay just high enough up and to get his balance and stop it. So I don't think Woodley came in really looking for a fight. I think he came in just looking for a blitz, and off the takedown would have been preferable, but he didn't get it, so he had to keep blitzing, keep throwing, and he made it entertaining while it lasted. He landed a couple good ones, but just couldn't quite find that like one punch knockout shot. And as he kept swinging, Luque found his hook counter fairly soon after. And then from there, it was just a cleanup where Luque found a couple more shots to keep him wobbled, keep him backing up, and then probably merciful to end it with a Darce as he did. And I said going into this fight, I would pick everyone in the top 15 except Damian Maia against Tyron Woodley. I don't think I can say that about this version of Tyron Woodley because he looked way more dangerous. And I think he does find that shot on a couple of guys. But I don't think the UFC is going to be willing to pay him the contract he has in order to stop the hype of up and coming guys in the 15 to 10 range, because that just hurts the value of their prospects, and Woodley's not getting back in title contention at this point. So Dana had some comments casting doom and gloom on the UFC future of Tyron Woodley after this fight. You've got to give credit to him for doing his utmost to turn his career around at what I dubbed like the last chance. Went out on his shield, and that I think at least he knows he did everything he could. I mean, Vicente Luque is one of the best welterweights in the world, one of the most dangerous welterweights in the world, and Luque, or Woodley, excuse me, came absolutely swinging at him with his career on the line. So Vicente Luque, I mean, we all know. Tyron Woodley, we all kind of knew, so nothing changes after this fight, but it's still a really fun co-main event, which led into the main event. And I'm gonna struggle a little to talk about this one because my heart bleeds for Stipe. That was tough to watch. He got knocked out cold by Francis Ngannou, who put it all together. I guess that's the most important takeaway or point to harp on for this segment, is that Francis Ngannou has set a new standard for the heavyweight division that looks like it's going to be a fascinating viewership to watch people try and rise to that level, because he did everything so well in that fight. He mixed his technique and athleticism beautifully. He couched the threat and kept it poised but ready to go, and he got the best of both worlds. He didn't gas out, but he kept intimidating Stipe, just keeping that jab out there beautifully, mixing in just enough threatening punches to keep Stipe on the back foot and keep him from getting into his game, and then just unleashing the explosiveness at times. He had like that jumping straight in there. Stipe shot for one single leg, which Francis just kind of violently shucked off, and then like exploded with a very similar sequence to what you saw him finish JDS with. I thought it might be over then and there in the first round. He just exploded with hooks on him from kind of like a body lock position, and it was terrifying. Man, Stipe's chin held up like no one else's we've seen against Ngannou over the past few years. Everyone else has been out there after like one of those shots. He took a good 5 or 6. But in the second round, Francis finally found a jab straight. He speaks to hiding that athleticism and power behind a more refined technique that made it harder for Stipe to read and deal with and predict and counter. And that 1-2, just like the jab wobbled him, the straight sat him down. Stipe again, just surviving like almost no one has against Ngannou. But landing that counter shot was horrible for him because it got him charging in, and then he finally ate the shot that put him out clean. A perfectly technical counter hook by Ngannou, and then one overhand bomb for super necessary sake, unfortunately. And Francis Ngannou is the UFC heavyweight champ, and he's going to be really hard to take down, have fight ending power from the moment the bell goes, the technique to land it, and the patience to hide it and wait for it and not blow his load early. And it's going to be so interesting to see if he can stay at that level and for how long, and what people can do against him. Stipe, I feel like, has a good argument for a rematch. I mean, they're 1-1 now, and last time he lost to a guy and asked for a rematch, he came in there and got the win. So from that perspective, it makes sense. This was a 25-foot cage, and if I think about two of the biggest moments in the fight, they were Francis stuffing Stipe's single leg and Francis dropping Stipe to start that finishing sequence, and both happened kind of because of the cage. Stipe shot for that single leg in the open because that's what you want to do against a guy like Francis. Make him dance on one leg, make him balance that huge body, and take him for a ride. Having the cage to your back is a huge help in fending off that single leg, especially with the strength advantage Francis had, where he could sort of stabilize and then really just explode. So 5 feet of cage farther back, and Stipe maybe gets that takedown, and then that drop came with Stipe's back against the cage. So 5 feet further back, and maybe he has more lateral space to move. He can argue that. He took a lot of shots, so I wouldn't want to see him in there for at least a year. And at that point, he'd be 38, 39. So, and even if he wins, then the UFC is like, shit, well, now what? So I don't think the incentive is really there for the UFC to match Stipe up. Dana disrespecting John Jones in the press conference, probably on purpose, saying, I bet he wants to move to middleweight after watching this. I think he's just trying to set up a low ball for Jones, because Jones has such like a fragile ego at times, just when you see him like going nonstop on Twitter. And I think if Dana can swing the whole world into calling John Jones a pussy for not taking Francis Ngannou for like $500K and a Venom pair of shorts, then maybe he can goad Jones into taking that offer, which, bracketing all my feelings about John Jones, this would be a mega fight that honestly both guys should be getting tens of millions of dollars for. So I really hope that doesn't work, and I hope that fight, if it gets made in all its glory, with both fighters taking home the purse they deserve. It doesn't have to be Jones for me next, though. I mean, I think you've got Cyril Gane, Derek Lewis, and Alexander Volkov all coming off wins with their own arguments for a title shot. Francis said July, August, I believe, for his first defense. I'd be happy to see one of those three guys go. Personally, Volkov kind of intrigues me the most. Just if Francis wants to play the technical striking game, I think it gives Volkov a little more of a chance, even though if you've got like 10 explosions coming in the first 2 minutes, I feel like there's a better chance of Volkov getting knocked out versus 10 explosions over the first 2 rounds. Even though the ladder will set Francis up better for 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds, which he still would have a good chance to win. I just think Volkov would test the range, and the guy's got a fairly durable chin, so that would be an interesting one. The Derek Lewis rematch would be hard to market maybe after that first fight. Well, hard to market based on the first fight, but there is a bit of a story there. I guess it would kind of complete the Ngannou redemption arc if you view like the low point as that first title loss and then that fight against Lewis. And then Cyril Gane and Ngannou have trained before in Paris. So that would be interesting. Gane with his defense certainly has a really good argument for being the next guy to get in there and stay safe with Francis. I just think with his career so young and early that it wouldn't hurt him to get a couple more wins before going in there. I'd love to see Gane versus Blade and put that kind of test on Gane. So there's so many options at the heavyweight division. You could match Stipe up with one of those guys first after like 8-month layoff, just to see like he really is still at that top level and build a bit of a better case. It's hard to feel like there's any bad option with any of the things I just described. It's going to be really exciting watching the division take on this terrifying apex predator of a champion. And that's, I guess, where to wrap up this UFC recap. It was wow.
The other thing that was popping up on my social media feed was the promo for Ben Askren and I believe it's Jake Paul getting ready for their boxing match. It kind of fell off everyone's radar for a bit after the Nate Robinson bout, and now we're gearing up towards it, and it was pretty interesting. A lot of shenanigans, of course. They got a little physical with each other, and you could, even from that one little clip, you could kind of tell the difference between a celebrity and a real fighter. And so, Max, I was just wondering if you saw that video and what your thoughts were from it.
Yeah, I saw Ben Askren just sticking his hand in Jake Paul's face, and I don't know how familiar you are with this guy, but that's just his personality. Like he's such a good heel and like just naturally gonna get under everyone's skin. Like there's two types of people in Ben Askren's world: the regular like thick-skinned people and then guys with targets on their back, and he loves to find those and make those wherever he goes. Marty from Nebraska is still one of my favorite lines by him. When he saw Kamaru Usman at a press conference, and this is, I think, partly why he took this fight. He knows how to rile people up and market himself and hype the fight. If you go back to Jorge Masvidal's star-making night of that flying knee, that was the fight that most people were most excited for, and a lot of that was because of the shit talking and like funky, annoying style of Ben Askren. I remember like a Twitter poll that night. I was something like 80% of people's fight they were most excited for on a fight with 2 title fights. I don't know, does it get you going like, man, I can't wait to see these guys try and punch each other in the face?
Well, I can't wait to see the highlights. I'm not going to watch the fight. The thing that stood out to me was Jake Paul came with a shot, and it looked like he didn't even touch Ben Askren. Like Askren ate it and was like, okay, whatever. Kept walking away. I thought that was interesting. I don't really know if that is significant, but a lot of people were saying like that's the difference is Jake Paul like trying to give this guy a full punch and he really didn't feel it. And I wonder if that has some sort of foreshadowing for how this fight is going to go.
Certainly helps to sell it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the frame difference between these two is, like if they're relatively equal or Jake has a bit of an advantage there. But I mean, Ben Askren is very used to guys trying to knock him out. It's just going to be different where he doesn't have his normal tools to deal with it. But you kind of get the indication the game plan is going to be just let him come forward and bum rush the way he did in that Nate Robinson fight and just weather it and get out of the way, and then like start taking advantage once he gasses it, which it's celebrity fights will just always sell. Like just the chance to see one of these two guys go unconscious is even when you can see through all the high circusness and shenanigans and advertising culture, it's still, man, I would love to see Jake Paul get knocked out, and Van Askren could be funny too. But speaking your chin, there's a clip I will try and find for you where Robbie Lawler picks Ben Askren up and like gravestone slams him on his head, and 2 seconds later Askren is like back at it. So he's certainly got a chin. All right, I think that wraps up this Combat Corner. And we're back. We still got a lot of the show to get through. Time to get to our bread and butter sports recaps of the week. Let's kick it off with basketball.
Of course. I want to start in Portland, where Norman Powell debuted with the Portland Trailblazers, knocked down 22 points. Really successful while in their first game. Rodney Hood and Gary Trent very underwhelmed for the Raptors. But I want to get to last night's matchup where the two teams who made the swap go at it. And 3 days after getting traded, these guys are going up against their former teams. In the first half, the Raptors offense was clicking. A lot of deflections where they would pick it up and just score, or like hit a three with like 5 seconds left on the shot clock. And just, you could tell by the way the game was going that the Raptors had to get really lucky to win this game, or things were going to fall apart because they weren't getting those bounces anymore. And that's what happened in that third quarter. They scored 10 points total, which is nearly impossible to do in today's NBA. Norm Powell with a breakup of one of the plays that he knows so well, getting a dunk. He didn't have a spectacular performance, but was solid. And Damian Lillard was facilitating, but it was Gary Trent who really, I think people have high expectations for him. And it looks like right now he's forcing his game. He's not letting shots come to him. He's trying to force the action. I think he was 2 of 11 or something at one point, and really struggling. Rodney Hood had a good second game, hit a buzzer beater 3 at the half. He looks solid, but again, neither of those guys played in crunch time down the stretch. And you could tell they're still learning the game and trying to feel their way into the flow of the Raptors offense. And yeah, that they just fell apart in the second half. The Blazers continued to score. Any team with a serviceable center is just going to kill the Raptors because they have none. Really, really frustrating to just watch Enes Kanter get hook shots and offensive rebounds, and Robert Covington too, and then somehow managed to stay in front of Siakam on the other end. Just like really tough to watch this game. And the Raps continue to only play painful games where they'll fight their way back in it. I think they brought it within 4 with about 3 minutes left. I think even within 3 with 3 minutes left after trailing by 10, and just could not finish the deal. And McCollum with 2 big buckets late down the stretch and secured the win for the Blazers. And as a Raptors fan, it's been really painful. We know that we can throw away the season. I think a lot of us still are hoping that they can make a run into one of those play-in seeds. But if you look right now, they are sitting 7th in the NBA lottery in the pecking order because the Western Conference is so good and a lot of those teams have better records than the Raptors. There's only 2 teams in the West with the worse record than the Raptors. So they sit 7th. And as of right now, they have a 32% chance of getting one of the top 4 picks in the NBA draft, which is not terrible odds. Obviously, individually, it's 8% around for each of those picks. But I saw a lot of photoshops of Evan Mobley in a Raptors jersey last night. And obviously, it would take some really, really high level luck to fall into the top 2 picks. But it's a possibility right now, which the Raptors haven't had in a long time. So people are excited to draft one of those high caliber picks in this upcoming draft. It's really like the top 5 especially are very highly regarded. And so if you're a Raptors fan, I guess the win-win now you got to look at is either they make a run, make it in the plan, or if not, they have a decent pick in this upcoming draft, which is expected to be pretty solid. And Masai's been pretty good at drafting guys. So just got to keep looking on the bright side.
That's incredibly optimistic. My pessimistic view is they like have a late run, get just into that 10-9 seed and then lose and no playoffs and no top 5 draft pick. Although I feel like even if we were 6th or 7th, I can see we fall to like 10th in the lottery and get a lot of talk on like rigged league doesn't want Canadian team to succeed. So you gave the optimistic outlook. There's my pessimistic hedging.
Yeah. Even if they make in the play-in games and lose out, I think they'll still have a shot, a very small chance of getting into the top. Just with the NBA's new lottery odds, it really like evens the playing field for all of those teams who don't make the playoffs, and all of them have at least a shot of getting into that top pick area. So yeah, either way, just there's something to hope for, and that's where you gotta stay. One more game I want to get to, and then we'll get to some even bigger news off the court. But Zion yesterday 2 days ago against the Denver Nuggets, getting no touches in the final stretch. Brandon Ingram getting locked up by Michael Porter Jr. on an off-ball screen. They can't even get a shot clock violation. The Nuggets end up beating the Pelicans. So then, with everyone on Twitter screaming for their lives, they come back, and Zion finally, this feels like his first game where he's the one who gets to touch the ball primarily down the stretch, and he was unstoppable. He was scoring in the paint. He was getting by guys, scoring over Boban, which is really hard to do. The dude is 7'4". He's the biggest player in the league. He's getting offensive rebounds. He's kicking it out to open shooters. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, the Canadian, had an excellent game yesterday. Very happy for him. But it just shows you, like, when Zion, I think, shot over 80% in this game. And for a guy who put up 38 points, like this, it's Shaq numbers. That's what it feels like. And if you're not giving him the ball down the stretch, I don't know what you're doing. And the Pelicans are 12th in the West. I think they're a game and a half back of Golden State for the 10 seed. They really need to like lean in. If they are really serious about making the play-in tournament, they need to lean into this and give Zion the keys, because Brandon Ingram, unless he's having a really hot game, he's taking low quality shots, and Zion, every time he's touching the ball, is getting you a high quality shot, whether it's in the paint where he is unstoppable or he's kicking it out to an open shooter. And the more reps he gets, the more he's going to see how defenses are going to adapt to him. And he's just going to get smarter and smarter and be able to create shots in all different situations. He's much must-watch television. Every time the Pelicans are playing, you got to turn in to watch, because he's just a freak of nature that you have to watch. And I talk about him almost every week on the show, but it's hard not to, because everyone had him extremely hyped. He had the injury, fell off the radar a tiny bit, and now he's back and he's just balling out. So really fun to watch him play. So now we'll move to off the court to the buyout market, where we had two major signings by two top contenders. The Brooklyn Nets, first in line, signing LaMarcus Aldridge off the buyout market, and he will join their team. I'm skeptical. There are obviously a lot of graphics talking about how many all-star appearances this Brooklyn Nets lineup now has cumulatively, but Aldridge is so far removed from being an all-star and really played rather poorly for the Spurs this season, like contributes very little on the defensive end. Obviously, he can still step out and hit that mid-range game and take advantage in the post, but his game has aged out of the current NBA, and I don't know what value he really provides to Brooklyn at this point, besides like veteran leadership, which they have a lot of already. I think you probably are better off taking one of Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge. Now they have both. I guess in the regards, it's just another 6'10", 6'11" guy you can throw at the bigger guys in your division, and hopefully just, I don't know, even like pick up some fouls, or maybe they have some savvy defensive awareness to give you some added value. But I really didn't see the purpose of signing Aldridge here for the Brooklyn Nets. He joins the team, but yeah.
Maybe they're looking at the Laker model last year of having guys like Howard, Rondo, who they can bring in come playoffs, and that worked out pretty well for them, and that's their line of thought with Griffin Aldridge.
Yeah, I could see it with Griffin, because you could tell that Blake Griffin, like everyone believed he was grounded, but he's already thrown down a couple dunks. It seemed like he was more just not trying and conserving himself. It feels with Aldridge a little bit more that he's just old at this point and just a little bit too slow, especially on the defensive end. I guess Brooklyn doesn't care anyways, because they don't play a lot of defense, but like he won't be able to guard anyone in the playoffs. They're just going to put him in every single pick and roll while he's on the floor. So you can put almost anyone around James Harden and they'll be successful offensively. I'm not really worried about that. And Aldridge is a guy who can hit an open shot. So that's fine for them, but just defensive. I think if you're Brooklyn, you got to be looking to add a bio guy who maybe has a little bit more defensive upside just to help.
As they are now, do you have them picked to win the East and go to the NBA Finals? Like, I know it's a bit, but if you had to say right now.
Well, I picked them in my season preview, so.
Yeah, nothing's changed. Well, a lot of the team has changed since then.
Yeah. Nothing's changed for me, especially because all the questions so far have seemingly been answered. Like James Harden is the guy touching the ball primarily. Kyrie Irving is in that off-ball killer presence that he kind of operated in when he was on Cleveland with LeBron, where he just would choose his spots and take over a game. And then, of course, they've been doing all of this without Kevin Durant, who's probably the best conducive superstar you could ever add to a team, because he scores so efficiently and he does all the other things that you need him to do. So I think this Brooklyn team is unstoppable offensively. It'll be how many stops they can put together, but really, like, they have to be the favorite. Just with the level of offensive talent, it's unparalleled. 3 like isolation creators, we haven't really seen anything like this. So that they're definitely still my favorite. I don't know how much added value that you get from signing LaMarcus Aldridge.
Gotcha.
On the other hand, the buyout move that I did actually see some value in was the Los Angeles Lakers adding Andre Drummond after a buyout. And this I think is low-key a huge move, because Andre Drummond is a 4-time rebounding champ. He is another guy where you could see him taking the foot off the gas a little bit while he was in Cleveland. And while fans may tell you he's not a guy who stats can like translate to winning games, he still has all the tools that the Los Angeles Lakers need. A little bit more size to throw at other centers. He rebounds the heck out of the ball. And while that might be empty rebounds, it's still rebounds. And some guys just don't even get rebounds, like Aaron Baines and Chris Boucher. So at least you have a guy who grabs rebounds. And you have to think about Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee, I would say, are worse than Andre Drummond. And look at the success they had with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So you got to think of it like that. When those guys are back and it's playoff time, Drummond is going to lock in defensively because they are going to force him to. And then offensively, with all the attention that those guys gather, Drummond's going to have free dunks. He's going to have, and he's even a little bit underrated in terms of playmaking, but it's those guys will keep him in line and make sure that he's not doing the class of Andre Drummond, like, I need the ball in the post to stay engaged in the game, and I'm going to complain about this, and I'm going to grab only rebounds and not really do anything else. Like, those guys will keep him accountable. And it just gives the Lakers as a team more versatility at the center position. You can run AD at the 5 if need be, but you also have Harrell, you have Gasol, you have Drummond, who all give them like kind of different looks. And so, yeah, I think it's a huge move for them, because Drummond was basically a max guy who they now have on a minimum contract as a buyout. And while he's not, I think he's better than the min, but nowhere near the max, you're still getting value if you're having him on the min, right? And I think he's still young, believe it or not. I think he's 26, 27, like just in the prime of his career. It feels like a move that people are really low on Drummond now. But again, once you put them next, especially if you just put anyone next to LeBron James, he's going to bring out the best in them. And so this move has huge potential. And again, nothing really changes for me. My final is still set, Lakers and Nets, that I picked at the beginning of the season, and nothing's changing there. It's going to be interesting how Drummond acclimatizes himself right now with the vacuum of power in that Lakers team, and Harrell stepped up a little bit in the last 2 games. They've gotten some big wins over teams that they needed to beat in Orlando and Cleveland. The Lakers only are a game and a half ahead of Denver and Portland, so they could slide from 4 to 6 in the next week. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to follow. They really have to win these next couple of games. They have a couple more weak teams to play where they need these wins, and they're just trying to stave off long enough for their top guys to come back. So really interesting to watch. We will shift gears now to the NCAA and a March Madness recap. A couple of Cinderella stories ending this weekend. Oral Roberts being the most notable one. They fall to Arkansas. Max Abmas had a chance at a game-winning 3, and it just bounced off the rim. Arkansas takes it in a close game by 2, and they move on. Oregon State continues their Cinderella run. Another fantastic performance by them. They beat Loyola Chicago. The Beavers they entered the Pac-12 tournament a couple of weeks ago, and if they had lost in that Pac-12 tournament, they wouldn't even have made the March Madness tournament. But they win out in that tournament, and now they're just on a roll. It's crazy that a 12 seed has made it now all the way to the Elite 8, and they have a decent shot of moving on again based on how they perform against Houston. And that's kind of the next storyline, is that really top level teams continue to just take care of business. Baylor, Houston, Gonzaga, Michigan, all relatively easily move on. That's 3 1 seeds and a 2 seed that are just making their way through their brackets relatively easily. And then we had a really exciting game in the late afternoon, UCLA and Alabama. Alabama is, I forget, Tyler Reese, the kind of their 9th man off the bench, 6'9" big man, career 31% 3-point shooter, catches the ball just about 5 feet behind the line, hits the buzzer beater 3 to send the game to overtime. A huge shot from Bama, and then they brick all of their free throws. I think they shot 11 of 25 from the free throw line, and UCLA just pumps them in overtime. They ended up winning by 10. So UCLA, an 11 seed into the Elite 8. I don't know the last time we've had 2 double-digit seeds make it to the quarterfinals, the quarterfinals of this tournament. But yeah, couple of teams feeling like teams of destiny. They've got it in for them though. The Mobley twins, Evan Mobley, specifically, who I mentioned earlier, they take care of business against Oregon. Evan Mobley had a nice 2-handed poster late in that game. If you want to go watch that one, it was nice. Had some great screenshots there. And we've got our Elite 8 set, Oregon State against Houston. Probably going to go with Houston here. Despite Oregon State's run, Houston's look really solid. Arkansas versus Baylor. Baylor, again, has just been murdering teams, so I have to go Baylor. Gonzaga versus USC. This is the game to watch right here, because you've got 2 of the top 3 draft picks going at it, Jalen Suggs and Evan Mobley. And this Gonzaga team is just, the whole team itself is incredible. Timmy and Corey Kispert and Jalen Suggs and the rest of that Gonzaga team, I can't not pick against them, because they are on their way to an undefeated season. But USC is going to be their toughest matchup that they've had. Really going to have to contain those 2 Mobley kids. And then finally, we've got Michigan against UCLA. I love the color matchup in this one. The light blue and the yellow. It's bright. It's perfect. Games get underway tonight, so no rest. It's going to be fun to watch them happen. And I guess I got Michigan. So we got 3 1 seeds making it to the Final Four, and then either Houston, Oregon State. But again, March Madness has some great storylines, but it always ends up usually having a top 1 or 2 seed making it to the Final Four in recent years. So looking forward to that. And that wraps up the basketball portion of our podcast. We'll take a quick break and come back for some tennis. And we're back. The Miami Open is in full swing. and Max has got some coverage for it for us because he is on TSN, and so he gets the matches and has been tuned in for a lot of Canadians in action this week at the Miami Open. So Max, break it down for me.
Yeah, we've got all our big four Canadian players to talk about. Some's tournament, 3 out of 4's tournament still underway, so that's pretty good. Starting off with Bianca Andreescu, who has won 2 matches now over her past couple of days, and tonight at 8:30 takes on Muguruza. In both matches, she's had like an aggressive opponent to deal with. I think the book on her just coming back from injury has been don't let her get comfortable, don't let her get in the zone, force her on the back foot as much as you can, and that's going to lead to some unforced errors for her. And that was kind of the story in both, though she pulled through both times in the first matchup in the second round against Martin Sova. They had a tight first set. Bianca making it more difficult on herself than she needed to with a lot of unforced errors, but she pulled through, and then she really did clean it up in the second set, which was nice to see. Her drop shot had really been troubling her and being like sometimes a key to success, but just losing her too many points. But when she got that going consistently, she was able to pull away and take the second set cleaner. This third round matchup against Anisimova, a US prospect, was a lot tighter, going into 3 sets. Bianca took the third set or the first set in a tiebreak, and then up and down momentum in that second set, but again, just making it a little harder on herself than she needed to with some of the unforced errors. But credit to her opponent, who played like a great aggressive game of tennis and was able to get out with a lot of winners. Then in the third set, Bianca had the big moment, breaking midway through and then serving really decisively out. So credit for her, showing that experience that she's already accumulated at the top once she had like the game in her hands with that break coming midway through the third set. She was able to serve. I think she won her last 2 service games, both 45 love. And I don't know how confident I am with her chances going on against this tournament. I think Muguruza tonight is going to be her biggest test so far. And she won, I think, against a less experienced at the top opponent who made some key unforced errors that were a big part of Bianca picking up that break midway through the third set. And I feel like normally when I'm watching Canadians play, I watch them control the game and decide their destiny in their own hands. Against Anisimova last night, it felt like Anisimova had destiny in her hands and dropped it, and Bianca was able to stay clean enough to win while still a couple unfortunately timed double faults and missed drop shots getting her into more trouble than she needed to. But you hope that the more games she accumulates, the more she can return to form and clean up some of that consistency and get the versatility of her game going, because I think that is a struggle for someone of her style getting back into form. There's so many things you need to get rolling, getting the serve, cleaning up the double faults, having those drop shots nailed, having a serviceable backhand, forehand to dictate rallies. It's hard for it all to come together in 1 or 2 nights. So hopefully she's still at the peak of her game enough in those big key moments to keep moving through the tournament, keep getting that experience and returning to form. We'll see what happens against Muguruza tonight at 8:30.
As the 8th seed in the Miami Open, I think a successful tournament for her would be making it to the quarterfinals. So winning this next match, just like maintaining kind of that seeding position, which is all you can really hope for in your first major tournament back from a long list of injuries. So rooting for Bianca, wish her the best of luck.
Yeah, I'm probably extra harsh, like wanting to see a world championship or a tournament win every time I watch. So a bit unrealistic expectations and hopes, probably. One Canadian I have had to shelve those expectations for on this tournament is Felix Auger-Aliassime. He had a pretty solid second round. It was kind of funny because he takes an incredibly long time to serve, like just dragging out and taking every second he can to prepare. But it was his opponent who got into trouble with the clock on that one. So I think he got a bit discombobulated arguing with the ref, and Felix closed it out after that. But then in this third round matchup, it was just an absolute shootout against this giant of a man, Isner, who has this terrifying serve from that leverage point. And it was such a tight match, honestly. Like, I don't think there was a single break in the match. Both just winning their service sets, and it wasn't flawless tennis. There would be the occasional unforced error, double fault, just unable to dictate a rally. But then they'd always clean it up at the end of the service game and just win. Like, I think they both served at like an above 70% success rate landing that first serve. I think they both were winning their first serve points in like the 80% rates. So it was the tightest of margins, but Felix did ultimately lose in that first tiebreak. He had a chance to smash at the net and just sent it wide, and just had one of those, what on earth, like what just took over my body, because that wasn't me, like looks on his faces and moments.
Sounds like us playing tennis.
Yeah, I think across all skill levels, that feeling is pretty universal. Just the consistency as to which it happens, but even at the top, it does happen occasionally, and it happened to Felix at the worst of possible times, and that lost him a bit of momentum in the rally, and then he was down 4-0 in that first tiebreak and fell. Then same thing in the second set, just crazy high level service game, digging themselves out of any stumbles they had through back and forth, will of nerves to stay at the very top of the serving game. But ultimately, Isner just better in the tiebreak that came. He managed to get the break to close out and win this match point. So Felix falls, showing some really phenomenal serving, but unable to deal with that serving, which I think is where he's got to go back to the drawing board, and just find a way to get those balls in play, and then use his athleticism to get the rallies back to a 50-50. Like, I saw him do it a couple times. You lunge, you send that ball preferably like high and far back in that way that just kind of like discombobulates the opponent a little, where they've got to get on their back foot, get to the ball, and it's still an easy return, but it brings the style of play less into like a dictate rally, and they're going to be going like corner to corner, have you on a loop. But Felix has the speed, the athleticism to get to those balls, and then he could slowly turn those rallies into 50-50 and start to dictate, is how I would have liked to see him handle the service return. Ultimately unable to do it. Isner, it's worth mentioning, is now 11-0 in tiebreaks in the Miami Open. So maybe the guy's just built different when he's on those courts. But again, it's such a tight match and such tiny mistakes in the grand scheme of how many points are played that ultimately cost it for Felix. I think he had a pretty solid showing of himself, just came up against a guy who was serving a little bit better, and in the zone, it's going to take a hell of a performance to overcome something like that on the service return, and Felix not quite there yet. I don't have much to say about Raonic. He'll be playing today. He's had the easiest of times so far, I think, in the second round, coming through, only dropping 3 games, and I guess it's 9:50 right now, so he'll be stepping onto the courts in about an hour before this pod's even been uploaded. So good luck to Raonic. And then Shapo also will be playing today after he moved on to the third, which was a really fun match. Another 3-set game both looking really aggressive. Unlike the Felix Isner match, this one, the rallies were a lot more key, and you did get some more extended, fun rallies. Mostly a server's advantage type match. I think there was a sequence in the second set after Ivashnikov came up in the first set. They both were breaking each other, but I think it went like Shapo got broken, broke again, and then returned to form, and then the service advantage continued. And it really was neck and neck, step for step, each guy pressing back whenever they got forced to step back. The unfortunate moment came in the third set. I think it was something like 2-3, and then some rain came in. Ivashnikov, they had to pause for 10 minutes. Ivashnikov was down advantage in a deuce on Shapo looking to break. He came back and double faulted there to give Shapo the only break of the set, which Shapo would close out on. Pretty strong last game, closing 45 love with some phenomenal serving. So you've got to feel bad that in this like step for step, smallest mistake costs you in the third set when both guys have the service game going, that it's something like double faulting after 10 minutes of not playing that ultimately is the difference that gets Shapo the break he needed to win the set. But I'll take it.
Yeah.
So Shapo, also moving on, playing today, and he just probably the most fun of the three up-and-coming Canadians to watch. That left-hand backhand slice is just such an unorthodox shot that he throws so well. And I'd say momentum-wise, in terms of like potential and playing out like to the level of their abilities, I'd take Shapo over Bianca to have a deeper run in this tournament. So maybe I'm just saying this to eat my words and haha, you were wrong. Bianca actually moved on. We'll see what happens, but it's been really fun to watch so far. I'm loving this era of Canadian tennis, and it's honestly a pleasure to stay up to date on it and talk about it. So look, hopefully I can continue to watch throughout this week, and come Friday I am recapping the latest of wins for these surge of Canadians at the Miami Open. Maybe we'll get more to the very, very top seeds, though there have been some big upsets early in this one. So some great tennis going on the tour so far, and yeah, we'll be back Friday to recap whatever goes on this week. We're back, and finally we have some trade news in the Canadian division coming up on the trade deadline, although probably not the team most people would have expected it to come from, with the Montreal Canadiens getting Eric Staal from the Buffalo Sabres.
Yep, a third round pick and a fifth round pick going the other way to Buffalo. It's a great pickup for Montreal to add to their center depth and add another great veteran presence to the team. The 7-day quarantine is a big factor for these Canadian teams. Now they can feel a little bit less pressure making the moves and being able to tread water, especially with Montreal. It's a smart time to make the move with a lot of their games being canceled this week. That they just got rescheduled. The new schedule announced. They pushed back the end of the season a little bit longer, which I think is a smart idea. So Eric Staal will be joining the team shortly and has not had to miss many games for the Canadians. And as a Leafs fan, it would be nice to have an Eric Staal in the team. It would be quite an old line to throw out there if you decide to put like Thornton and Spezza with him. That's like the 2006 All-Stars. But a solid move for Montreal, moves their needle a little bit, makes them a little bit less ideal to play in a first round or second round playoff series. But there's going to be more moves on the way. And this was kind of just the first of many that we'll see from Canadian teams.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how teams or how front offices respond with this.
Yeah. We move into the games on Saturday night. We just had two, and it was a good night for Leafs fans. They come back. relatively outplayed the Oilers for most of this game and just had a stretch where they gave up 2 quick goals. Connor McDavid with an unbelievable no-look pass. Like, I actually just sat with my mouth agape for like 20 seconds after that happened, because you see him glance over and see Draisaitl's there, but he's flying in at such a ridiculous pace and then just throws the no-look pass across his body right on the tape of Draisaitl for the one-timer. Like, Campbell has no chance there. Gamble gave up a weaker goal to Darnell Nurse on the rush, who sniped 5-hole, but overall, another solid game. A really big save late on McDavid that helped keep this game tied and into overtime. Alex Galchenyuk, his best game as a Leaf very early, 2 clutch assists. One of them was just a fantastic reflexive play where the puck deflects to him and he quickly just taps the puck between his legs to Tavares, who snipes it home. And then he was going for Justin Hall on the doorstep, but it tips off of someone's skate and goes right to Nylander, who has the wide open net. So you'll take that one. That's a lucky bounce for the Leafs. And Austin Matthews
of the night.
Yeah, Austin Matthews. And he had been robbed all night. Like, Mike Smith had a couple one-time glove robberies of Matthews on the power play, and he hit the post. He's been all around the net, and he's actually shooting more recently than we've seen. So it seems like the wrist is at least getting a little bit more healed up. Obviously, this is their 3rd game in like 2 weeks, so lots of time for it to heal. And he's been ripping it a little bit more. And of course, he's been all around the net. And then, of course, the goal that he scores was not even meant to be a shot on net. Passes, gets deflect off a stick, and then off Darnell Nurse's skate into the net. The OT winner for the Leafs. Big 2 points to stay, to move past Edmonton and make sure that the game didn't end up tied in the standings. And then the Calgary Flames. Johnny Gaudreau comes out, responds to the one-liner by Daryl Sutter where he said, "I hope he has more energy in his 500th game than his 499th." Gaudreau comes out with the energy. Solid game. Mangiapane being a pest with a pretty brutal cross check that will probably give him a 1-game suspension, but he also scores a goal. And the Flames with a big win over the Jets that they really, really desperately needed. And as a Leafs fan, you're happy because that keeps the Jets 2 points behind us, and we have a game in hand. And the teams get to rematch and go back at it tonight. That's why you love the Canadian Division. Tonight, we have the next gen game, which has always been a circus show for the Leafs in the past couple of years. Always a high-scoring affair. I wonder if this will be the same. I think last year it was 7-5 against Carolina or something like that. And Marner had the spinorama saucer pass to Matthews. Or it might have been the other way around. Got to go watch the highlights from that one because the next gen game is just fun all the time. Get the kids involved, get the youth enjoying hockey, and then later we got the Jets and the Flames again going at it. And another big, every game for the Flames is big at this point because their season is hanging by a thread. I don't know, Max, if you have anything to add about what you saw from the 2 games.
Yeah, I didn't see much. I've called the season for the Flames, so I'm in whatever mode about how they perform. Nice to have the Jets held back a little, but I think this is the top team for a reason, and I'm sure they've typically responded pretty well in back-to-backs after a loss. I did get to see the Austin Matthews goal, which was hilarious. That like ping pong level shot, and it's just the Leafs have a chance to really have closed out on the Oilers and have like a 7-2 record against them all season long tonight. I think this is the last time the two teams match up, and the Oilers looking like they're certainly front runners to challenge for first in the division right now. If this McDavid Draisaitl magic doesn't dry up, and why would it? It seems to be like an infinite source of goal scoring and points. So having such a dominant run against this team might come up huge, and it's both teams have been a bit bipolar this season and are going to be looking to close off their series with the momentum and confidence to go and take a run to close out the season. So I think it'll be an important one, and I don't know why the Leafs have had the answers against the Oilers that they haven't been able to generate against weaker looking teams, but I love that they have. And I guess that McDavid Draisaitl goal answered the question I posed a bit earlier, that no, not even the Leafs, who shut them out for 3 games straight, can stop this, like I said, infinite source of goal scoring.
Yeah, it definitely does give you some confidence if the Leafs manage to match up against the Oilers in a playoff round, that it just seems to be a pretty good matchup for them. And it doesn't seem like the Leafs match up the same against any other team in the division. But if it's the Oilers, then you got to at least feel some sort of confidence that they have a system figured out to have success against this team. And so we'll see. Tonight's their final matchup, and after that, they're going to go their separate ways, and it's going to be a battle to see who can race to that first place finish. So that'll finish our Talking Hockey segment. We'll come back after one more final break to talk a little bit of football and wrap up the show.
All right, time to wrap up the show. I'm going a little cross-eyed tracking this story that you've gotten the notes on some NFL trade market stuff. What's going on?
Yes, the Miami Dolphins making some waves on Friday with their moves. They show some confidence in their current starter, Tua Tagovailoa, and move out of the third spot, trading back in the draft because teams are chomping at the bit to get one of these top 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the draft. It looks like they're all going to go in order. Lawrence, Wilson, Fields, Lance, and Mac Jones all look to be in the top 10 of this draft, and teams are moving up to get the guy they want. Miami trades back with San Francisco. They get 13. They get 2022 and 2023 first and a 2022 third round pick, pardon me. It sets a huge market price for whoever's trying to move up for number 4, which Atlanta owns. Cincinnati will stay at 5, but if you're one of those teams like Carolina, Denver, that's sitting later in the top 10, all the quarterbacks you thought you might have had a shot at are going to be gone by this point, because Lawrence, Wilson are going 1-2 basically at this point to Jacksonville and New York Jets. And then San Francisco now has their pick of Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, whoever they want to insert. And then Atlanta probably will see them trade out at some point too, because they, I think, are still confident that Matt Ryan can get the job done. And so one of those teams, Denver or Carolina, might put together some assets and try and move up to that spot to get that last 4th or 5th guy that they're confident in. It's a ridiculous thing. It really shows the value of quarterbacks, that teams are willing to give up so many picks just to move up and get the guy they want. Then Miami takes that pick, some of the picks they got from the Niners, and move back up to the number 6 pick, getting from Philadelphia. And this move, essentially what you're thinking is they're looking to get the top wide receiver in the draft. If you have 4 quarterbacks go first, and then Cincinnati is most likely going to take an offensive lineman. So they're looking to get a Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, or Jalen Waddle there at 6. And I think that's a pretty good pick, because all 3 of these wide receivers look to be top end talent for many, many years. And if you can partner them with Devontae Parker, then this team, the level of weapons that you give Tua just increases dramatically. And so I think it's a smart move. They basically move down 3 spots and get an extra 3rd rounder and an extra future 1st rounder out of it, which is pretty good management by Miami. It seems like they've been doing all the right moves except for drafting Tua over Justin Herbert, which is a pretty big one. But besides that, they've been sticking to their process, sticking to their plan, doing it the right way. And they're going to have a ton of developing young talent to just add to this already impressive team. And they're going to be a contender for the next couple of years and really match up against Buffalo and New England at the top of that AFC East. Should be fun to watch this division grow. The other last bit of news, I guess you can also talk about what this means for Jimmy Garoppolo. It looks like San Francisco will trade him because you don't want him as your backup guy for one of these young guys. They already have some solid backups. So Jimmy Garoppolo most likely going to be on the move. We'll see who's in the market for him. Could be a return to New England, but we'll see and follow that closely. The last bit I want to get to is the NFL is expected to come out and announce their 17-game season format starting this season, adding an extra game to the schedule, still only one bye week. Huge implications money-wise, huge implications health-wise for players, because already so beat up through 16 games, adding another game is just going to lead to even more injuries. A lot of the players I don't think are happy with it, but this is kind of just the transition phase for when the NFL eventually goes to 18 games and they'll have 2 bye weeks, and they're really going to spread out that schedule and just continue to grow the length of the season. And yeah, it's a big thing for money and for health, but also it adds one more intriguing matchup that we can tune in and see. And you're going to have to change the way your brain works, because now people become so accustomed to thinking 12-4, 11-5, 10-6, all those like easy 16 game add ups. Now you got to change and go 10-7. That's going to be a weird one to calculate. So just some of the brains that are stuck in 16 games are going to have to add an extra game to that. And it should lead to some more intriguing matchups and more teams pushing for it early rather than dropping out of the race early, because you've got one extra week to try and make up ground if you have a poor start. So we will hear what the announcement looks like and how they frame that. I don't know when it will happen, but we've got all week to follow it. And Easter weekend coming up this weekend. So hopefully people are going to get outside and have some safe, fun, exciting Easter egg hunts. We didn't really do it last year because the pandemic was big time fear, and no one was really doing that. We got news on our phone. We were laughing. The Suez Canal ship finally been straightened out and floated and on its merry way. And so the economy is back in full swing, if that's important to anyone. And yeah, that's really going to do it for me. Max, you got any more show notes for us?
No, I think we're good to wrap up.
Awesome.
All right, let's do that then, because I'm starving and want to go eat. So Sports Next Door is signing out.